everybody, and welcome back to the Pache Bene channel. I am so excited to have today's guest here with us today. Robin Wildman is a Kingian nonviolence trainer, practitioner, retired public school teacher, and the director of Nonviolent Schools Rhode Island. Nonviolent Schools Rhode Island works with Robin's Kingian nonviolence curriculum to help bring nonviolence and its teachings into schools. Robin, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Of course. So, Robin, I think it is so amazing that you are an educator because both of my parents are teachers. And when I was looking forward to this interview, I was wondering what inspired you to start this initiative of Kingian nonviolence being taught in the schools?
Well, it's a long story that I'll try to make short. In 2001, I was teaching a team teaching program with the local police department called Safe Communities. And a guest came into my room with the police captain, Bill Flatley. I didn't know who the guest was. I was later introduced to Dr. Bernard Lafayette Jr. and his wife, Kate. And I came to find out that Dr. Lafayette had worked as a strategist with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And after Dr. King was assassinated, Dr. Lafayette, who I will refer to as Bernard, has spent the rest of his life doing what Dr. King asked him to do on the morning of the assassination. So Bernard was with Dr. King, and Dr. King said, Bernard, we need to institutionalize and internationalize nonviolence. And that's what Bernard has spent his whole life doing. So on that day that I met Dr. Lafayette, the students had a lot of questions for him in my 5th grade class, and he stayed and answered some questions, and they asked him if he would come back again. So he agreed, and he had just been hired as the director for the Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies at the University of Rhode Island here right in our town. And so he was very close to our school and was able to come every week or so. And we just started learning so much about the civil rights movement, Dr. King, and this concept, this philosophy called Kingian nonviolence. So Dr. Lafayette, after Dr. King was killed, had created this training manual, and he was teaching people in the world about Kingian nonviolence and how to reconcile conflicts. But he had never taught young people. And so this was his first experience with 10 and 11-year-olds asking really important questions of him and challenging him about some of the things that he was teaching them. Guess who was learning at the same time? Me. And I started to reflect on the way that I had been as a teacher the previous 10 years or so, and what direction did I want to go in? And so from that time, I decided that this was information that all teachers need to have. And so I wrote a manual to help teachers learn how to implement the philosophy and work of Kingian nonviolence in their own classrooms. And I did a little teacher training. But mostly I was focused on my students, and they every year would train all the students in the school in Kingian nonviolence. They would prepare modules and go into the classrooms, and other teachers were learning along the way, and we transformed our school. And that was great, and that was going great until I was transferred to a new school. So all the 5th grade teachers in town went to a new school. It was a grade 5, grade 6 school. And I kind of just went by myself again and didn't feel connected to other people in this work, but was still teaching my students. So my colleagues started listening to some of the things that I was saying that my students were doing when they had conflicts, that they were really focused on using Kingian nonviolence to address the conflicts. And it made my life as a teacher so much easier. I had more time to teach because I was spending so much less time on conflict management than my colleagues were spending a lot of time on. So all during that time, this was happening. And then my colleagues asked me, could I teach them Kingian nonviolence? And so began the transformation of my second school, Broad Rock Middle School in Rhode Island, And I ended up training almost 40 staff and both administrators, the nurse, the music teacher, the art teacher, the librarian. We had a whole range of teaching assistants. And we started looking at how do we implement this philosophy and this practice. We looked at our climate and our culture, and we decided this is the direction we wanted our entire school to go in. So we started practicing Dr. King's 6 principles, which is one of the pillars of Kingian nonviolence. And that is a way to change the climate and culture. And we also were using these strategies to address conflict that probably have never been used in a school before. So all during that time, I'm still thinking like, this needs to get bigger. Like, this is working in a school. This could work in any school. And so that's when I started brainstorming with some colleagues that also are training Kingian nonviolence about a way to create an organization that could do what we did at Broad Rock School. We wanted to replicate that model. And so in 2018, we opened up our doors as Nonviolent Schools Rhode Island, and it's been growing, and we've been in lots of different schools. And because of COVID, we've had to kind of change our direction, but we've been offering a series of anti-racism book clubs on Zoom. And we are hosting Kingian dialogue conversations right now, where a larger group of folks can come together to talk about issues that are happening, not just in classrooms, but in the world, and how do we use Kingian nonviolence to bring that about. Most importantly, right now in this town where I live, we are partnering with the school district and the superintendent to create an anti-racist school system. And that's big news because we want this work to be top down, bottom up. So we've done some Kingian workshops for the school committee and the superintendent and the principals. And we also created a BIPOC advisory board that we are facilitating, and they're looking at all of the policies and curriculum and practices in the district to revamp everything so that we can create a more just system for all students.
That is so wonderful, Robin. You guys come here, come to Kentucky. We need Nonviolent Schools Kentucky.
Yeah, we sure do. Hey, oh, that's a good idea.
Yes.
Have branches.
Yes, branches. That is so wonderful, Robin. Thank you so much for sharing. And I was wondering also, can you tell me about ways that you've seen the nonviolence curriculum change the schools, and stories that you've heard from students about that?
Sure. So one story pops in my head right away, because when I was just teaching my own students, as a teacher of 5th grade, you think, how much are the kids going to remember, when they grow up? Am I really making a difference? And I've had former students come back as 20-something-year-olds and tell me that the most important thing they ever learned in school was nonviolence, and that it changed who they were as people. It changed the way they interact with people who might be different from them. It also put them in a path professionally that was a way that they could give back to community. So Kingian nonviolence really is about self-reflection first, and then looking at the world and seeing what can I do to make this a better place for everybody. So that is not just a one and done instance. That's happened quite a few times with my older students. And I do have a couple of quotes. So every year at the end of the year, I gave my students a 10-question survey to fill out with short essays, asking them to reflect back on their nonviolence training so that I could have some data to reflect on for myself. Like, is there something they don't understand about nonviolence and that kind of thing? So this is one student who I asked about how nonviolence might have changed them, or what did they like about it. And she said, one thing I really enjoyed this year was learning as a group and everyone being friends. In earlier years, I've been excluded from groups of friends, but this year has been different. I feel like we can work together better and not have huge disagreements. So one of the things in a Kingian classroom, and one of the most important things is forming a bond like you're a family. That's the beloved community. And that's our goal. That's principle 2. The beloved community is the framework for the future. And so everything we do drives us to that point. And if something happens that breaks the community apart, then it's the responsibility of everybody in the community, because we're all affected by that conflict, to do something about it. And so I always give students that responsibility. And I say to them, yes, I am a part of this community, but this conflict right now is something that you can solve together. So here's just an example. Students don't really like to clean up after themselves typically. And a teacher often every single day is saying, okay, it's time to clean up, let's go. The custodian isn't, not their responsibility to clean up the floor and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just put that on them and I said, you know what, this is your place. What are we going to do about this? And one girl, this was early on, it was in September. The kids didn't really know each other. She just took out a piece of paper and a pen and directed the whole thing. And they came up with jobs and a chart and a whole system for the chart and what would be fair. And it worked beautifully. Now, what would have happened if that came from me? Here's your job chart. Everybody has a job. Let's go. And I still would have been repeating the same thing. Let's go. It's time to clean up. So that in a Kingian classroom where we're practicing this philosophy and belief that we are a beloved community, we depend on each other for a lot of things, not just when we're in a conflict, but when we're living and working together. Another student said, when you make a mistake, no one laughs at you, because then there would be hurt feelings. This is the last one that I'll read to you. Learning about nonviolence in a school is important because a lot of bullying goes on in a year at a school and on the bus. So if everybody in a school knew about nonviolence, I bet there would be a whole lot less bullying around. We would have a more peaceful community. And if there were still bullying in a school who cared about nonviolence, all the people in the school would know how to stop it. And the kid getting bullied would know how to stop it too. And we would get the bully some help. And that's another impactful thing that we talk about, is the difference between telling on somebody because you want them to get in trouble, or getting help because somebody needs your help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful. And I love how, it's like you said, it's not just when you're in a conflict, it's like, just every day, helping each other. And it's just so beautiful. And I'm so grateful to you for helping so many kids and starting this. Thank you, Robin.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's the point of Nonviolent Schools Rhode Island. It's to spread this idea of teachers being able to spend less time on conflict management and more time teaching, when you give the responsibility, not just the responsibility to the students, but the tools that they need to do it. And that the end goal is reconciliation, always. That is your vision. It's, I'm sitting with you at this table and I'm really mad at you right now, but I know that we're going to do this and get this work done, and we're going to collaborate on a win-win solution so that we can at least be civil to each other. You don't need to be friends with everybody, but we do need to work together and exist in a community together. A good lesson for people across the country to think about. We're not asking you to be friends with everybody. How can we get along in a way where everybody gets what they need, and what they want?
Yeah, so true. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as my last question, I would like to ask, what does nonviolence mean to you?
I think nonviolence is a word that is interpreted in a lot of different ways and oftentimes misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give you a reflection of the Kingian nonviolence terminology. I think that might help people who are listening in.
Mm-hmm.
Nonviolence in the Kingian strategy is action. So if we want peace, we have to use nonviolence to create that peace. And so in Kingian nonviolence, I mentioned those 6 principles. We also have 6 steps to address conflict.
Yeah.
And what we find in our training, unfortunately, is that most adults don't really have the tools that they could have to address conflict. We usually tend to go back to, we revert to maybe what our parents did when we were in conflict as kids, or how we do the same dance with our spouse or our partner, and maybe it doesn't always work so well, or we try and ignore it because it makes us feel uncomfortable. Well, nonviolence is about looking at a conflict as a way to create change, to create better relationships, and to create a better community. So we use these 6 steps, and I'll just talk quickly about 2 of them. The first 2 are information gathering and education. And if we could just stop and neutralize our emotions to gather those facts and information to educate ourselves and others about what is happening, oftentimes that is going to solve and stop a conflict from escalating and getting worse. Then we go right to reconciliation and repair those relationships. So Kingian nonviolence is a strategy-based, philosophy-based practice that has a goal that is very specific, is to create a beloved community. And a beloved community is not a utopia. It's a place that has conflicts, but the people in it know how to address those conflicts using collaboration and keeping a goal in mind that we want everybody at the end to be satisfied with the outcome. It's a win-win collaboration.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. And I think it's wonderful how you're teaching, how you are working to teach young kids, because often I think nonviolence is seen as, oh no, they can learn about that when they're older. But for me, I first started learning about nonviolence when I was in 5th grade, and it really shaped how I am today. And so I thank you so much for being here and for all that you do. And I'm just so grateful for you, Robin.
Well, thank you so much, Rosie. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate everything that you're doing to shine a light on the goodness of nonviolence, and that it is hard work. Nonviolence is not easy. It's difficult to keep yourself in a place, in a mental state where you can neutralize your emotions to address conflict appropriately. And it takes practice. It's a practice. No one's perfect at it.
Yeah.
It's a daily practice.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Robin. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.